So, I grew up on a small island. Now, in this island, there was a beach that I'd used to go to. Now, this beach was filled with seashells, and some of those seashells were very interesting. And those ones, I'd pick up. You see, every seashell that I picked up was like learning something new, gaining a new experience, if you will. Of course, I was only a little kid back then, so that beach that I'd used to go to as a child was, as far as I was concerned, my border, if you will. Of course, I've grown a lot since then, and as I've grown, I've learned, and as I've learned, I've been able to erase a lot of these misconceptions. So today, ladies and gents, I'd like to take you all through a journey across some of the borders that I have been privileged to cross. Now, I use the word privileged because it's not easy for someone like me to travel. Of course, there's a big problem of getting across that big blue sea. But there's also this, which is my passport. You see, I hold a Sri Lankan passport, and if you rank this passport amongst all the other types, it comes in at 186. Now, the problem's worse because there's only about 200 countries out there, so it doesn't help me much at all if I want to travel. There's often a long, tedious visa process that often ends with me pulling a few hairs. But why was this the case? Why was my Sri Lankan passport ranked so poorly? You see, to answer this, we rewind back a bit to when I was born. So, I was born in the midst of a civil war, a gruesome war that endured for 30 long years, and entire industries like tourism, in which both my parents happened to work in, suffered, and life became hard. See, the war was essentially about drawing a line within the country, building a wall. But what it did inadvertently was made the existing line, my seashell-filled beach, thicker and harder to cross. But what could we do about it? How could we make life better? To give you an idea of what life was like back then, let me tell you about a birthday present that I once received. For my birthday, I received an eraser. Now, that's all my parents could afford at the time, and I didn't know its cost, but its value was immeasurable to me. It could have just as easily been a PlayStation 4. And it didn't seem to do much, but it could erase lines. So I was a pretty excited kid back then. But luckily, things did get better. So before long, I had an opportunity to go overseas. And this is when I met with this strange yet amazing machine. It was big, it was white. Ladies and gents, I had seen an aircraft for the first time in my life. Now, being that little kid, I still didn't understand how this worked. So, how does it work? How does it fly? Wait a second, can I fly it? I would ask my mom. And her trying to explain to me, she would tell me that this large bus of sorts would be able to take us places. Places where the food was different, I was told. Places where the people were different. Places where life was better because there was no war. So it's then that I realized that no matter how great a wall someone builds, this aircraft thing could simply hop over. So drawing the link there, I kind of knew what I wanted for my next birthday. So, in all of this, we were boarding the aircraft, and I realized my mom actually failed to explain to me how it actually flew. So I kept pestering her. And then she kind of settled for the easier answer. It's a lot of very important magic. Now shut up and buckle up, stay quiet, you. So I said, okay, I had to listen to Mom. Anyway, undeterred to find this magic behind flight, many years later, I got my passport stamped, I hopped on an aircraft, and I flew off to Melbourne, Australia. Now, of course, when you travel at such a young age, you'd have people calling you up and saying, beware of culture shock. So I said, okay. And what did I do? I downloaded an app on my phone. And all it did was it converted Sri Lankan rupees to Australian dollars. That should do it, I thought to myself. And luckily, for the most part, it did. It was okay. Going to Australia was essentially like little me going to a whole new beach. There were so many opportunities and experiences lying there ready for me to just pick up like seashells. Whether it was the simple things that fascinated me, like waterproof plastic money, or the more serious stuff, like the strict gun laws they enforced, which have been very successful. They had a brilliant legal system, and it truly earned its rank as the second highest in human development. But after this experience, I was hungry for more. So I gathered a bunch of my friends, or rather mates, and signed up for a study program abroad. So, you know the drill. I have to stamp my passport every single time I hop on a plane, and this time I was off to Nanjing in China. Of course, I had met more people by now, so more people would call me up to say, "Beware of culture shock." And it was 3 times louder, I kid you not. So what did I do? I do what I did last time. But instead of 1, I download 3 translation apps. That should surely do it. That should make me a Chinese scholar, I thought. Oh boy, was I wrong. See, this is what happened on my first night there. So I ran across the road to the grocery store. I typed what I wanted in English, pressed play. It said it out in Chinese. Before you know it, I'm back in my room with 3 essential items: bread, butter, and milk. So let's dine, right? I open up the box of butter, and I realized something. The butter is liquid. See, I had bought oil. Didn't do too well. It's okay. So I just took the bread out, tried a slice. I had bought cake, not bread. Now, I wasn't doing too well, but I still had the good old wholesome milk to get me through the night. So I open up the carton, take a big gulp. See, it was a lot thicker than milk. I had bought yogurt, thinking it was milk. Luckily, I had swiped an apple from the aircraft on the way, so I didn't actually starve that night. But it was evident that me and my friends had to get basic Mandarin lessons. And this was interesting because this is the first time that I was forced to learn a new skill or pick up a seashell of that sort. It was necessity for survival. But it was interesting because before you know it, we were out in the market screaming, "Thai Guela, it's too expensive," and trying to bargain down the prices. Or in our spare time, we'd be learning more useful phrases for day-to-day life, like, "Ni hao, wo xi huan mei niu." Anyway, it's interesting how all this ties up, because in learning Chinese, I had a local friend. And one day, as friends do, we sat down to share a meal. Now, during this time, I was trying to tell her about that beach that I'd used to go to as a little child, all those seashells that I'd pick up. But I realized something. She wasn't quite getting the picture. You see, in all her life, she had never seen a beach. This is a map of Sri Lanka. And if you put this outline to scale against the outline of China, that's what it looks like. From where she was, she could have traveled for days on end and not reached her own country's border, let alone a beach on the East Coast. See, it's only then that I gained a true sense of appreciation for that beach that I'd so easily go to as a child. Eventually, she did manage to overcome her country's borders, and I had returned back to Melbourne and finally learned the magic behind flight. So then, I thought I'd done it when I scored an internship to yet another country. So of course, stamp my passport, hop on a plane, and this time I was off to Hamburg in Germany. And much to my surprise, I was told that I'd be working there on the world's largest passenger jet. That's it right there. So if the aircraft were like erasers, I was thinking, this is as big as they come. But that's when something interesting happened. See, a fellow bunch of interns and I, we took a trip to a small town called Stade one day. It was a beautiful day, and I remember taking this picture. After spending some time there, we made our way to share a meal, as friends do. So we sat down, had a meal, And the waitress noticed us, and at the end of it, she walked over and said, "You lot look like a lovely bunch. Where are you guys from?" So then, we took a step back to scan our faces, figure out where each and every one of us was from, when we realized something. There were 8 of us from 8 different countries. No repeats. That means we had 8 different childhoods, different accents, different passports. But we hadn't even realized it. We were all there at one table over a common language, and that's when I realized that one common language was a bigger eraser of cultural borders than that large aircraft I'd work in and day out. With this great revelation, I had to return back to Melbourne. And of course, when I travel, I have to stamp my passport, hop on a plane. But this time was different. This time, I didn't get a call. No one warned me about culture shock. Because of course, I'd traveled a lot by then. No one thought it was necessary. But that's the funny thing about culture shock. You never know when it will shock you. And this time, it hit me hard. Because as I was going, I was thinking to myself, if I was molded and shaped by all these experiences from all these countries, which one of them was I to pick? Where was home? It's a deep and difficult question to answer, and one that I encourage all of you to think about. What frustrates you about where you are right now? What do you think you can do to change it? If home could be anywhere you wanted it to be, where would that be? So in trying to pick one of these lines, I came to realize I didn't have to stop at 4 experiences. There was a whole world out there, so many other lines to pick from to continue on and learn some more things. But in that very literal answer, I realized that these were all lines that we drew on a map. See, it's not often that we get to look at a map like this, where we have erased all those lines. This is Earth's landmass exactly for what it is. The only borders here are those seashell-filled beaches all over the world. So here's my question to you. What limits you? What are the invisible lines holding you back? It could be geographical, but it could also be physical or psychological, and it's different for each and every one of us. But the thing is, you need a variety of experiences to even realize these limitations. And you need those erasers that clear the way for you to make you go out and get those experiences. I was lucky to have found mine in my passion for aviation. But we've seen today that that's not the only eraser out there. It could have just as easily been that language, that song, that meal. So, there are so many beaches out there, there are so many places, so many experiences that you can get. These seashells are all out there waiting for you to pick them up. I'm not saying you have to break the rules or even color outside the lines, but realize one thing, that these lines are there, and just as they were made, they can be changed through experiences. Thank you.